From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Thousands of young people in Senegal attend and live at religious schools called daras. These schools accept only boys. The students are called talibé and they study the Quran. Some daras force students to ask strangers on the street for money and food. The government had promised to stop this forced begging by 2015. But the organization Human Rights Watch says there has been little progress. Recently, a government study found that more than 30,000 students were begging in Dakar, the capital. The boys were reported to be as young as 4 years old. They are often walking the streets shoeless and in torn old clothes. Matt Wells is a West African researcher for Human Rights Watch. He says the boys must bring back a required amount of money, sugar, and rice or face punishment. He says teachers will often severely beat talibé who fail to meet the demand. He also says the boys usually are hungry, live in dirty, overcrowded rooms, and receive very little real education. In March 2013, 8 talibé died in a fire in Dakar. Neighbors said they knew the children could not escape from the school building in which they were living. After the fire, Senegalese officials promised to take steps against child begging. But Human Rights Watch says the government has closed only one dara for safety reasons. HRW says there are hundreds more that violate students' rights. Senegal's Ministry of Justice says it knows of the problems and is working on new legislation. But a ministry official notes there is cultural resistance to laws restricting religion. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Parents in South Australia's Aboriginal areas may lose some of their financial aid if they do not send their children to school. New rules link school attendance with government assistance to people living in poverty. Warren Mundine is Prime Minister Tony Abbott's top advisor on issues concerning Aboriginal Australians or Aborigines. He disagrees with linking the aid to school attendance. Instead, he urges the government to find ways to improve attendance without punishing parents. He says he thinks strong punitive measures should be the last plan of action. Mr. Mundine says the situation can change if tribal leaders support education. He says the government needs to work with parents and communities to make what he calls a massive cultural change. Other officials argue that the threat of stopping aid will force families to take education more seriously. In South Australia State, only 50% of children stay in school after the age of 15. In some areas, as many as 90% of Aboriginal children struggle to read and write. The state government says it has special programs for Aboriginal students. It says students work with their parents and teachers to develop a personal learning plan and re-examine it every year. Public schools also have people available who can work individually with Aboriginal students who need extra help. And there is a program that helps Aboriginal students deal with the change from middle school to high school. About 670,000 Aborigines live in Australia. The state of Western Australia also has special programs for these native peoples and other groups. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. It was not just another day in a classroom recently for some young people in Washington, D.C. These student volunteers visited the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History to test a new program. Some students explored the mysteries of human bones. Other students examined an insect under a microscope. The student volunteers were among the first to help test a new exhibit, a new showing at the museum. The program has an unusual name, spoken as Curious and written as Q?RIUS. The exhibits are designed so young people can learn about science by taking part in experiments. The program combines the newest technologies and scientific equipment with more than 6,000 museum objects, both real and digital. Students from local schools helped develop the exhibit, which combines science and art. Teachers will bring their science students to the exhibit in the mornings. In the afternoons, the exhibits will be open to everyone. Many of the students already have their favorite activities at the center. 13-year-old Nate said he liked exploring the containers with dinosaur bones. Addie is 12 years old. She liked the bee display. She found that the bumblebee and the yellow bumblebee were very different when she examined them under a microscope. Another student, Ben, said he enjoyed an exhibit that lets people use their senses to learn. He said, for example, that a butterfly smells a little like tea. Involving the senses, smell, touch, hearing, is one of the exhibit's major goals. Curious can also be found online. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. South Africa has 11 official languages. If you want to say hello, it's Sawubona in Zulu and hello in Afrikaans. Now, South African school children may start using ni hao to say hello. The country's education ministry hopes to add Mandarin language classes in some schools. Mandarin is the official spoken language of China. That country is a major trading power for South Africa. The two countries recently signed an agreement that identifies 5 areas of cooperation. They include curriculum development, mathematics and science, teacher training, and research and development in basic education. South African officials have not said how much the Mandarin language classes will cost. Troy Martens works for the Ministry of Basic Education. She says the new partnership is extremely valuable to both sides. The part of the plan that has gained the most attention is a proposal to offer Mandarin classes in schools. Last year, a public opinion survey showed that South Africans have mixed feelings about China. It found that 46% of South Africans do not like the spread of Chinese ideas and customs in their country. And 60% of South Africans said they dislike Chinese music, movies, and television. But Ms. Martens says trade with China is more important than those feelings. She says it is extremely helpful for South African students to learn about the Mandarin language and Chinese culture. And, she said, not every school will offer the language training. South African census officials have not said how many native Chinese speakers there are in the country. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Students at St. Louis University have launched weather balloons into the sky above the city of St. Louis, Missouri. The United States Space Agency, NASA, is paying for the project to measure ozone gas. It is part of a study to learn more about air pollution and our climate. The students are getting the opportunity to carry out a real scientific experiment. They used a laptop computer and a radio receiver outside the St. Louis Science Center to communicate with data-gathering devices on the balloon. Before launch, the students tested all the instruments and attached them to the weather balloon filled with helium. Gary Morris is a professor at Valparaiso University in Indiana. He is the lead trainer for the nationwide study. The professor says NASA wants more information on ozone because of how it affects our atmosphere. High above the Earth, in the stratosphere, the ozone layer keeps harmful ultraviolet radiation from reaching the ground. But in the lower atmosphere, emissions from cars and other sources like petrochemical plants form ozone pollution and smog. They cause unhealthy air conditions that affect breathing. Jack Fishman leads the ozone study at St. Louis University. He says new requirements that decrease pollution have lowered ozone levels in American cities. But he notes that pollution in remote areas continues to increase. He blames industrial activity in East Asia for that pollution. Jack Fishman says polluted air is being blown across the Pacific by air currents in the upper atmosphere. He says ozone pollution has slowed the growth of farm crops and forests. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Many Syrians are trying to study overseas while a civil war continues in their country. Thousands of Syrian university students sought help when they learned there was money to help them continue their education. Leen Al-Zabak is with Jusur, an organization for Syrians living overseas. Jusur joined with the American-based Institute of International Education to create the Syria Consortium for Higher Education in Crisis. More than 40 universities in the United States and Europe agreed to provide emergency aid to Syrian students and professors. Each university decides which students to accept. Universities in the consortium are supporting 70 students right now. One member of the consortium is American University in Washington. It is supporting a Syrian graduate student and a faculty member in the university's School of International Service. Daniela Kayast is the vice president of the Institute of International Education. She expects there will be aid opportunities for 600 Syrian students during the next few months. She notes that a former president of Portugal, Jorge Sampaio, launched a scholarship program called the Global Platform for Syrian Students. He created the program because of Portugal's history of educating Jewish refugee children during World War II. The Institute of International Education also has a scholar rescue fund for university professors and researchers in any country in crisis. This year, the fund found places for 30 Syrian scholars in 5 countries. All of the scholarship programs may be found online at iie.org. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Almost 40 years have passed since Chinese Communist leader Mao Zedong died and his Cultural Revolution ended. Changes in Chinese life caused widespread suffering during the Cultural Revolution. In recent times, some aging teachers and student leaders who lived through this period in Chinese history have been telling their stories. One of the first such stories published in China told of an apology from a student to a teacher. The apology gained attention in the West since appearing in China in 2010. The teacher was Chun Bi, now 90 years old and retired. She worked at the Beijing Foreign Language School during the Cultural Revolution. Today, Shen Xiaoke is a 60-year-old lawyer. He was a teenage student at Chun Bi's school in 1966. In August of that year, school was suspended. Political indoctrination was extreme. Mao incited people to denounce teachers, intellectuals, and others in important positions. Students influenced by his speeches turned against Chun Bi. Chun Bi recalls the period with horror. She says, "For us who were persecuted, it was a nightmare." Shen Xiaoke says he heard many students argue among themselves about who was the most revolutionary. People tried to prove they were revolutionaries by hurting other people. Chun Bi said if students did not strike others, they would be accused of opposing the Cultural Revolution. So people who were normally not aggressive would start hitting victims. 3 years ago, Shen Xiaoke decided to face the past. "We need to apologize to our teachers," he says. He wrote Chun Bi an apology letter. He expressed his regrets for himself and for others in his class. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Kid Pan Alley is a non-profit organization that holds songwriting workshops for students across the United States. The organization recently visited a school in the Anacostia area of Washington. The children presented a concert with the help of songwriter and recording artist Paul Reisler. He established Kid Pan Alley in 1999. Since then, he has worked with more than 35,000 students and produced more than 2,200 songs. He says the power of music can teach children skills they might not learn in school. He believes the American educational system is focused too much on standardized tests designed to measure knowledge. But Paul Reisler says we now live in a creative economy. He says his group is trying to inspire children to be creative. At Orr Elementary School in Anacostia, 95% of students come from poor families. Marlon Ray is the school's dean of students. He says some of the children have difficult lives. But, he says, these kids still want to strive for greatness. Jonna Turner is director of programs at the school. She says the 4th and 5th grade students are often focused on more than school. Some have to help their families or live in homeless shelters. A shooting took place in April directly in front of the school. No one was injured, but the incident affected the whole community. Students are often influenced by what happens around them. Still, Orr Elementary School has a positive, hopeful atmosphere. Marlon Ray says the workshop and concert made possible by Kid Pan Alley created good memories that will last for years. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Chinese students have a long history of coming to the United States for education. And this month, American educators expect high schools across America to enroll more Chinese students than ever. 17-year-old Grace Liu is one of about 30,000 Chinese citizens at American high schools. She grew up in Tianjin, a city of 14 million people on China's east coast. This fall, she is starting her third year of high school in the southeastern United States. Grace attends Rabun Gap Nikuchi School in Rabun Gap, a small community in the state of Georgia. She sounds very happy with her surroundings. Anthony Scrow heads the Rabun Gap School. He says the number of Chinese applications or requests to attend the school has risen sharply in the last 15 years. Many of the students are from China's growing middle class. They want a good education and to improve their chances to attend America's most respected universities. Attending schools outside of China also means an escape from the intense competition at schools inside China. Memorization by rote is common there. This method of learning through memory exercises uses up a lot of time. It can keep students from taking part in sports or interest groups. Anthony Scrow says some of Rabun's citizens have expressed displeasure about the young Chinese arrivals. Mr. Scrow says his students see stories about China in newspapers and on television. He says they also will know 5 students from that country. He said this helps the student understand that they need to be aware and interested in what is happening around them. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Today, we hear expert suggestions for academic writing. Jennifer Ahern Dodson is an assistant professor of the Practice in Writing Studies at Duke University in North Carolina. Ms. Ahern Dodson likes to start a discussion with both students and professors planning to write a paper or essay. She asks about their earlier writing experiences. Were they negative or positive? She says you are not alone if you have had problems with your writing. Everyone struggles with writing. Writing is hard. It's hard for all writers at some point she says. And at some point, you are going to hit a roadblock, she adds. She advises to think about earlier experiences. When the writing is going well, what was happening? When the writing was not going well, what was happening? She says most people's negative writing experiences happened because a very specific formula or page limit was required. Another problem can arise when the need to do well on a paper is extremely important. Anxiety, she says, can make it harder to get the writing done. Ms. Ahern Dodson says when writing comes easily, the writers believe they have something important to say. She advises asking yourself questions. What insights can you bring to your paper? Why does this subject matter? What is the importance? For whom is it meaningful? Who will be reading it? You can ease writing by placing your attention on what you have to offer. That, says Ms. Ahern Dodson, is an important change for all writers. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Recently, there have been increased efforts to make sure children in Africa get a good, strong education. But a new report says governments are losing about $129 billion every year on poor quality education. As a result, about 1 in 4 students in poor countries cannot read a complete sentence. That represents about 175 million young people. The report comes from UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. It says poor teacher training and spending cuts are just 2 of the reasons for schools failing. Pauline Rose, an education specialist, directed the report. She says more teachers are needed in African countries south of the Sahara Desert. She says the area needs an additional 225,000 teachers a year to improve primary school education by 2015. Pauline Rose says governments like saving money by using contract teachers. These teachers are not government employees, but work by special agreement. Contract teachers can easily be dismissed. In addition, they earn far less money than teachers working for the government. The UNESCO report says governments will need to increase spending on education. In many countries, financial support for education has decreased or stayed the same in recent years. The report praises some countries. It says South Africa provides 6 times more money to teach students in areas with low education levels and high unemployment. And Malawi is creating teacher colleges to train teachers for rural areas. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Prasuti.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. The United Nations Children's Fund is appealing to international donors to help provide education money for Syrian school children. Safe places to learn, teachers, and supplies are all lacking, and almost 2 million young Syrian students have dropped out of school. UNICEF says about 40% of students from grades 1 to 9 across the nation no longer attend formal classes. UNICEF spokeswoman Marixie Mercado says about half of those children are now refugees in Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, and Turkey. In the northern city of Aleppo, for example, only 6% of children of school age are in classrooms. But the school year there and in other locations began as planned on September 15th. Talk of a military strike by the United States had caused uncertainty about starting classes. But schools opened after a strike appeared less likely. Still, many children who once walked to school are now taken there by their parents, and other families have simply left the country. Lebanon now is trying to help about 550,000 school-age Syrian refugee children. UNICEF says the Lebanese public education system can take care of 300,000 Lebanese children. UNICEF is establishing schools for refugee children in buses. In Jordan, UNICEF says about 2/3 of 150,000 Syrian school-age children are not in school. In Iraq, UNICEF says 9 out of 10 Syrian refugee children are out of school. Inside Syria, Ms. Mercado says the educational system has been torn apart. Both UNICEF and the Syrian government say about 3,000 schools have been damaged or destroyed. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Should girls go to school only with other girls? Is it better for boys to attend all boys schools? Educators at a school for girls in Washington, D.C. believe children do better in classes of the same sex. But other experts say there is no real evidence to support that idea. They believe there are other, more important things that make a school effective. Excel Academy is the first all-girls school in Washington, D.C. that is independently operated and supported by taxpayers. It opened its doors in 2008. One of its students is 10-year-old Anaira Clavijo. Anaira attended kindergarten in a classroom with boys. She has now been at Excel for the last 5 years. Anaira says boys have different interests than girls. She praises her school, saying the staff makes her feel like the smartest person in the world. The Excel Academy provides free education to children from families without much money. It serves more than 600 girls from preschool through grade 5. 3 meals are served each day. Kay Savage established the school and is its leader. She says that when boys and girls are taught together, the teachers teach for the boys. She says boys are a little louder and much more active than the girls. She says she believes that makes girls second-class citizens in their schools. Elaine Weiss is an education expert at the Economic Policy Institute. She believes other considerations besides same-sex classes have a bigger effect on success in school. She says everything that happens in children's early development is important. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. American librarians have announced their choices for Best Children's Books of 2014. One honored book is the story of a squirrel and an imaginative girl. Another is about trains. Deborah Taylor is a librarian at the Enoch Pratt Free Library in Baltimore, Maryland. She has served on several award committees. She says the committees look for good writing and good storytelling. The American Library Association's John Newbery Medal honors the writing of a book. Its Randolph Caldecott Medal honors the illustration or pictures of a book. This year, the Newbery Medal went to Flora and Ulysses, The Illuminated Adventures by Kate DiCamillo. It was her second work to win a Newbery. Flora and Ulysses is a humorous story about a squirrel and a girl who live in a world both real and unreal. The Caldecott Medal was awarded to Locomotive, a book by Brian Floca. It has been praised for its technical understanding and explanations of how things happen on a moving train. Librarians also give out other awards to books for children and young adults. For example, the Coretta Scott King Award goes to African American writers and illustrators for books about African American culture. This year's award went to Rita Williams Garcia for her book P.S. B11. The Robert F. Seibert Medal is for informational books. Parrots Over Puerto Rico by Susan Roth and Cindy Trumbore won the 2014 medal. Their book tells about how scientists and activists saved the local birds. Librarian Deborah Taylor says the book shows Puerto Rico as it is not often seen. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carla Babb. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Pakistani officials plan to name a school and a sports center for a student who stopped a suicide bomber. 15-year-old Aitazaz Hassan saved hundreds of other students at his high school earlier this year. The school is in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. Police said Aitazaz Hassan saw the bomber moving toward the building's entrance. The attacker looked suspicious to Aitazaz, who tried to stop him. That is when the bomb exploded. The attacker was killed, and Aitazaz died later in a hospital. The student's older brother noted that Aitazaz often said he would fight if he came face to face with a suicide bomber. Provincial Governor Shauqatullah Khan visited the home of the boy. He announced an award for the family of about $47,000. Governor Khan told VOA that the sacrifice of children like Aitazaz Hassan is a cause for national pride and a great honor for his village. Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif declared earlier that the student should be honored with Pakistan's highest award for bravery. Reports say the honor is expected to be presented to the boy's family on March 23rd. Pakistani education activist Malala Yousafzai expressed deep regret about the death of Aitazaz Hassan. She spoke from Britain. She lives there now after surviving a Taliban attack. She said she was pleased to belong to a country where brave people like Aitazaz Hassan are born. Malala has gained worldwide praise for her opposition to militants and her support for the rights of women. Her book, I Am Malala, is an international bestseller. But heads of private schools in Pakistan have banned it. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Experts estimate that half of the 6,000 languages spoken on our planet will have disappeared by the end of the century. In West Africa, academics are trying to protect the language and rich cultural heritage of Togo. At the University of Lomé, Professor Nbuike Adovi Goiakwe studies video of Gen cultural rituals. The professor is a cultural heritage specialist. He himself is a Gen, one of many ethnic groups in Togo. He has made films of Gen cultural customs with financial assistance from the United States. He says the Gen have an important place in Togo's history and culture. Gen rituals show how its people see their world, the interaction between the living and the dead, the seen and the unseen. The Gen believe in many different voodoo gods. But today, Professor Goiakwe says fewer and fewer Gen children go through voodoo initiation ceremonies. He says that increasingly, the new generation does not recognize the importance of these cultural traditions. He says formal education and the spread of Christianity have reduced their influence. Many young people think traditional practices are uncivilized. And while the Gen language is widely spoken in Lome, the professor says it is not taught in schools. Gen is one of about 39 languages spoken in Togo. Anahit Menashan is a language specialist with the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. She says a language needs people who speak it as their first language. She says a language needs people who can speak it as their second language. If there are not, she says, a language is extinct. She says languages can die as a result of increasing globalization. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Community colleges in the United States have a lot to offer. Educators say these two-year colleges may be a good choice for international students who have finished secondary school and want to study in the U.S. Today we tell about a program for such students. It is called the Community College Initiative Program. It is designed for students from areas underserved in education and skills training. It lasts one school year. Since 2007, about 2,100 students from 20 nations have taken part in the program. The Bureau of Educational Affairs of the State Department provides for their needs. 3 consortia, or organizations, of community colleges work with the Bureau of Educational Affairs to administer the program. Schools across the United States take part. Cider Rahman is project director of the Community College Consortium, led by Northern Virginia Community College. He says many students in poor rural areas do not have an equal chance to succeed. At the start of their stay in America, students deepen their knowledge of English and learn about their school's surroundings. They can choose from among several fields of study, such as information technology, business administration, and agriculture. Other areas open to them include media and journalism and engineering. Students attend classes and study at participating community colleges. They can also join in internship programs with businesses or nonprofit organizations. You can get more details of the Community College Initiative Program from the Public Affairs section of the U.S. Embassy in your country. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carla Babb. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Growing up can be hard in poor neighborhoods where crime is common. That is the situation Marco Antonio Aguilar faced when he started at Garfield High School in Los Angeles, California. The boy hated school. He says he had the wrong friends, often missed classes, and even got into fights. The school suspended him, barring him from attending classes. He almost was sent to a school for problem students. But Marco Antonio changed his behavior. He says a talk with his mother helped him change. And he praises his teachers for the help they provided. But now, students at Garfield High no longer receive suspensions. The punishment itself has been suspended. Jose Huerta, the Garfield High principal, took the action when he first arrived at Garfield more than 4 years ago. Back then, more than half the students were leaving school without finishing their studies. At the same time, Garfield was suspending nearly 700 students yearly. But Mr. Huerta had other ideas about how to deal with young people who misbehave. He said most of the suspensions were for behavior known as willful defiance. He said that could include something as minor as chewing gum in class. Under Mr. Huerta's leadership, students involved in willful defiance first talk to a teacher. Then a parent may get involved. Finally, group support can be provided. Today, Garfield graduates 85% of its students. And last year, the Los Angeles Unified School District changed its punishment policy. The whole district banned suspension to punish students for willful defiance. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. The reported rape of a 6-year-old student at a well-known school in Jakarta has received widespread media attention in Indonesia. The costly Jakarta International School, or JSI, serves many children of diplomats and wealthy foreign families. Indonesian police have arrested several suspects in connection with the incident reported in early April. Similar reports of sexual abuse at the school have followed. This week, another kindergarten student also said he was abused at the school. The Education Ministry ordered the kindergarten closed. The ministry said the school had been operating without permission. Tim Carr heads the Jakarta International School. He described the recent incident at the school as an unimaginable tragedy. He said the school is taking all measures to prevent another. Years ago, American investigators named a former JSI teacher as one of the worst child sex offenders ever identified. American William James Vahey worked at the school from 1992 until 2002. He killed himself last month after U.S. federal investigators seized some of his computer records. The evidence included 90 photographs of boys Vahey reportedly abused. The number of reported rapes is increasing in Indonesia, but the reports do not get a lot of public attention. Last year, the Indonesian Child Protection Commission declared child rape a national emergency. But it said it does not have dependable numbers on rape. A large part of Indonesian society considers it offensive to talk about sexual abuse. Victims are often afraid to report such crimes. They fear it will dishonor their families. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Many people believe that teaching music to children makes them smarter and better able to learn new things. But the organizers of a new study say there is no scientific evidence that early musical training affects the intelligence of young people. An estimated 80% of American adults think music classes improve a child's ability to learn and do well in school. Researchers at Harvard University, however, have found that there is one thing musical training does not do. They say it does not make children more intelligent. Samuel Mayer is a graduate student in Harvard's School of Education. He says it is a mistake to think that learning to play a musical instrument improves a child's intellectual development. He says the proof comes from studies that measured the mental ability of two groups of 4-year-olds and their parents. One group attended music class. The other went to a visual arts class. He says tests failed to provide evidence that those in music classes were any smarter. Samuel Mayer says only one study of many has seemed to show a small percentage increase in IQ, intelligence scores, among students. But he says musical training can be important for cultural reasons. In his words, we teach music because music is important for us. He notes that the works of writer William Shakespeare are not taught so that children will do better in physics. He says Shakespeare is taught because it is important. He does not think music needs to be any different than that. A report on the effects of music training in children was published in the journal PLOS ONE. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Prasuti. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report in Special English. A Vietnamese man hopes to raise the quality of education in his country by building parent libraries in rural schools. Nguyen Nguyen Thach provides libraries to the schools so books are more available in farming communities. He works with publishers in Hanoi to get the books at reduced rates for teachers and their students. By talking with farmers, workers, and students, Mr. Thach discovered most schools have enough textbooks, but many poor families have few books at home and do not visit school libraries. More than 90% of Vietnam's population can read and write, But academic performance in the schools remains low compared to other Southeast Asian nations. Corruption is a big part of the problem. Vietnamese media often report stories of teachers giving high grades in exchange for money. Some experts criticize teaching methods that depend heavily on dictation. They say asking students to repeat everything a teacher says to the class harms their ability to think for themselves. Nguyen Nguyen Tak says he wants people to invest money in books for a better future. To date, almost 1,000 parent libraries have been built in Thai Ben province. Hundreds of books are in each one. Several other provinces have copied this model. For each school, Mr. Tak helps build libraries for up to 4 classes. Others then follow his example. The head of the Anduk Secondary School says Mr. Tak's work has improved the quality of education. She thinks Mr. Tak's example helps students think more creatively, or, to put it in an American expression, outside the box. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. This is the VOA Special English Education Report. 826 is the name of a nonprofit organization that works to help students become better writers by thinking creatively. 826 is also the address of the first center where this literary arts program began in 2002. Author Dave Edgars and educator Nineveh Caligari started the program in California at 826 Valencia Street in San Francisco. It now serves 30,000 students through writing and tutoring centers in 8 American cities. At the front of 826 Valencia is a pirate supply store. Think of the kind of place where Captain Jack Sparrow might shop. Lee Lehman is the executive director. She says the idea of entering through a pirate store is meant to get students not to think of the place as a school or tutoring center. During the day, teachers bring classes on field trips, and volunteers help with writing projects. After school, students come for help with creative writing and their schoolwork. The center is for public school students between 6 and 18 years old. 826 Valencia is located in a mostly Latino neighborhood. Ms. Lehman says many of the children are from poor immigrant families. Each 826 center has a different theme, from the pirate store in San Francisco to a store for spies in Chicago. The National Chief Executive, Gerald Richards, says budget cuts in public schools mean less money for arts education. And as that goes away, he says, so does the ability for students to use their imagination. I think there is much more of a focus on science, technology, engineering, and math. There's a lot of focus on testing, and a lot of the teaching that's going on in schools is focusing on the test and passing the test, rather than thinking about how do we get kids to think. Lee Lehman says 826 builds confidence. Students can publish and sell their work at places like the pirate supply store and on the internet. In 2010, the programs across the country published 944 volumes of student writing. Ms. Lehman says students are proud when their writing gets published. One of the students in San Francisco, Sofia Marquez, says, "I get to use my imagination. That's why I like writing." You can watch another video about the program in San Francisco at voaspecialenglish.com. You can also find texts, MP3s, and activities to read, listen, and learn English. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Each year, 750,000 Americans under the age of 20 become pregnant. The United States has one of the highest rates of teenage pregnancy among Western industrialized countries. New York City has an especially high rate, with about 20,000 teen pregnancies each year. Since 1984, the Carrera Adolescent Pregnancy Prevention Program has worked to reduce the birth rate for teens. The program has worked with the Children's Aid Society, which operates after-school activities for young people. The sex education effort starts with children who are 10 and 11 years old. But sex education is only part of the effort. Psychologist Michael Carrera launched the Pregnancy Prevention Program 29 years ago. He says efforts to reduce teen pregnancy rates must help young people see themselves as successful adults. He says success is more likely when young people believe that good things are going to happen in their lives. Then they take steps to reduce the risk of teen pregnancy on their own. The program includes sports training, art classes, part-time jobs, and help with banking. Healthcare is also available, as well as advice on education. Young people in the program have 50% fewer pregnancies than other New York teenagers from similar at-risk backgrounds. Michael Carrera is now in his 70s. He says he is still excited to come to work. His program reaches about 4,000 students in 12 states. The Obama administration has recognized the program with a Social Innovation Award. In 2010, the administration ordered that federal money for sex education only go to programs that are proven to be effective. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report in Special English. A new report says more and more international students are attending colleges and universities in the United States. It also notes a large increase in the number of students from China. These findings are from the latest edition of the Open Doors Report. It is a joint project of the State Department and the Institute of International Education, a nonprofit educational and training organization. The report documents the record number of international students in the United States during the
2012 school year. It says more than 764,000 international students are attending American colleges and universities during the period, a 6% increase from the year before. By comparison, the number of Americans studying overseas increased by 1%. The report says 194,000 students at American colleges and universities were from China. That is an increase of more than 23% over the year before. Peggy Blumenthal is with the Institute of International Education. She says the number of Chinese students is at its highest level ever. Peggy Blumenthal says Chinese students prefer to come to the United States. Chinese students are not the only ones who want to attend American colleges and universities. After China, India sends the second largest number of students to the United States for higher education. India has about 100,000 students in American schools. South Korea is third, with about 72,000 students. Peggy Blumenthal says the advantage of higher education in America is that it is a very big and very diverse system. She says there are over 4,000 universities and colleges in the United States, so there is still a lot of room for international students. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report in Special English. A new study shows that simple, low-cost interventions can help teenage girls in Africa stay in school during their monthly periods. Paul Montgomery of Oxford University in Britain led the study. He said women are a driving force of development across Africa, so it is important, he said, to keep girls in school. 120 girls in Ghana took part in the study. Their average age was 16. They attended 3 secondary schools in urban areas and 1 in a rural area. In the study, girls at 2 of the schools received free sanitary pads and lessons on puberty. Their attendance increased by an average of 6 days during a 65-day school term. The puberty lessons included information about personal care during menstruation. The girls also learned about the biology of their developing bodies and about pregnancy. At the 3rd school, the girls received the lessons, but not the free pads. Attendance by these girls also improved about the same amount over 5 months. At the 4th school, the girls did not receive the pads or the lessons. That group showed no improvement in school attendance. Paul Montgomery says the girls in the study had several reasons for missing school during their monthly bleeding. A majority expressed embarrassment about the changes in their bodies. Paul Montgomery says the interventions might not only keep girls from missing school, but also reduce teen pregnancies. The Public Library of Science published the study in its journal PLOS One. A larger study is taking place in Uganda until 2015. For VOA Learning English, I'm Mario Ritter. This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Priscilla Nangarai of Kajiado, Kenya, retired as a teacher in 2005. Today, at the age of 62, she could be living a quiet life in retirement. Instead, she leads an organization at her home called GRACE, the Girls' Rights Attention, Care and Rescue Center. She tries to rescue Maasai girls from early marriage and make sure they get an education. She has rescued more than 700 girls since 1986. She now has 15 girls at her center, and she is building a dormitory to house up to 80 girls. In the traditional culture of the Maasai people, fathers often promise their young daughters in marriage to older men. Most girls are between the ages of 12 and 14, with some even younger. Their bodies are not ready for sex and childbirth, but that is not the only problem. Most of them must also leave school. Priscilla Nangarai's older sister was forced into marriage at a young age, but demanded that Priscilla receive an education. She says the problem begins when a girl gets booked when she is very young or not even born yet. She says booking is when a man goes to a family, and if there are little girls there, he can book a marriage with one of them. If one of the wives is expecting a baby, he will say, "I want something from this womb," and he can do that. A 14-year-old girl named Roslyn has been at the rescue center since 2008. At the age of 4, she was booked to a man who she thinks was about 60 to 70 years old. "Yes, I was booked," she says, "but when I knew the person that booked me, I just talked to Miss Nangarai. I told her the whole story." Maasai culture calls for the man who wants to marry a girl to start paying the girl's father once the booking has been made. Traditionally, the payment is made with cows, but today money can also be exchanged. When the marriage will soon take place, the girl must undergo a custom that some call female circumcision. Others denounce this practice, followed in Maasai and other cultures, as female genital mutilation. A 13-year-old girl, also named Priscilla, was brought to the center at the age of 5. Her mother wanted her to be educated. The girl says she is thankful, especially for health reasons, that she did not have her sex organs cut. She worries that she could have gotten AIDS from unclean tools. And that's the VOA Special English Education Report. Our website now has a weekly Words in the News quiz. Test your vocabulary at voaspecialenglish.com. I'm Mario Ritter.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Many rural areas in the United States have no doctor. Some medical schools are trying different ways to treat the problem. One idea is to educate doctors in smaller communities and hope they stay. Dr. William Cathcart-Rake heads a new program at the University of Kansas in the Midwest. He says, "We need more docs. There's somewhere like a quarter of all of our physicians in Kansas are 60 years of age or older. So we need to be replacing physicians too." He says medical students from rural areas now typically study in Wichita or Kansas City, two of the biggest cities in Kansas. They say, you know, I really have every intention of coming back to rural Kansas, but they meet a soulmate, they get married, their soulmate happens to be from a big city, and we never see them again. The program is based in Kansas' 10th largest city, Salina, home to about 50,000 people. Salina is about a 3-hour drive from Kansas City, past fields of corn, soybeans, and cattle. Student Claire Hinrichsen grew up in a town of about 600 people. One reason she likes the Salina program is because of the size. There are only 8 students, the smallest medical school in the country. Classes are taught by professors in Salina or on a video link from Kansas City or Wichita. Students who complete the 4-year program will then do their residency training in a small community in the surrounding area. One place a resident might work is the Clay Center Clinic, where Dr. Carrie Murphy is a family physician. Dr. Murphy says this is a clinic that has currently 8 doctors and 4 mid-level practitioners, and we cover, of course, this town, but we also have satellite clinics in 2 nearby towns. We just kind of operate as what I call a cradle-to-grave operation. We deliver babies and go all the way up to doing nursing home care. Rural doctors generally serve older, poorer patients. Going into a specialty in a big city can mean better working hours and more money to pay off student loans. The Salina program will pay tuition for each year that students practice in a rural area in Kansas. Dr. Cathcart Rake hopes 4 years of medical school and 2 years of residency will be enough time to put down roots. In his words, it's going to be, hopefully, harder for them to break away from those roots and go to bigger cities. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. The Kibera School for Girls in the Kibera slum in Nairobi, Kenya, is the first school in the area to offer girls free education. It provides free tuition, uniforms, books, and meals to girls who qualify. The students are from pre-kindergarten through the 4th grade. The school gets its support from the surrounding community by providing people with much-needed services. The people of Kibera struggle to provide themselves with food, shelter, clean water, and good schools. Girls face the additional problems of discrimination and violence. Parents and guardians usually withdraw their daughters from school rather than their sons when money is lacking. So, the Kibera School for Girls works to help the community understand the value of education. Parents do not have to pay, but a family member must work at the school 5 weeks a year as a way to support a child's education. Girls are chosen based on the potential for their success as students and on financial need. Helping women make better futures is why Kennedy O'Day established the school almost 4 years ago. He says that growing up in Kibera, he hated seeing that more boys than girls went to school. In 2004, Mr. O'Day started a community movement that later became the organization called Shining Hope for Communities. He wanted to make life better for girls as well as boys in poor neighborhoods. Mr. O'Day says he wanted everyone in the community to feel improvement in their lives. Today, the school provides services for everyone in the area, not just students. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report in Special English. Today, schools in the United States communicate with parents in many different ways. Mail is still used, but now schools and parents connect through email, Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, and Skype. The Houston Independent School District in Texas has more than 200,000 students. Most of them come from lower-income families. The newspaper Education Week recently reported on a digital literacy training program that the district has started for parents. Microsoft helped the school district establish computer training centers for parents at 5 of its campuses. Other schools around the country are also increasing their digital services, and not just in English. Many schools provide information in Spanish and other languages. Free online translation sites can also help parents stay informed about their children's education. Some school systems even give parents online access to their children's grades and schoolwork. 600 students attend Knapp Elementary School near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Joe Mazza is head of the school. He says nearly 1 in 5 of his students come from Bangladesh, and 12% come from South Korea. Joe Mazza says the most important way that a school gets to know parents is in face-to-face meetings. But under his guidance, the school has added social networking tools to meet the needs of the community. The school uses resources like Twitter, e-newsletters, and Skype. Teachers can talk to parents over Skype if the parents cannot attend a conference in person. Social media, Joe Mazza says, is providing us with many new and really free ways to connect with parents. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. A program in the United States brings scientists and engineers into elementary schools to teach teachers more about how to teach science. Dave Weiss is a retired engineer. One day each week, he volunteers at Georgian Forest Elementary School in Silver Spring, Maryland, near Washington. He works with teacher Fred Tanique on science projects for 10-year-olds. He says, Fred is so enthusiastic, and he's so much fun with the kids. I can see that he really loves what he's doing. I get as much pleasure from helping the teachers as I do helping the students. Student Jada Lockwood says she enjoys Mr. Weiss's visits to her classroom. She likes the drawings he uses to explain scientific ideas. The American Association for the Advancement of Science sponsors the Senior Scientists and Engineers program. Dave Weiss has been a volunteer in that program for many years. The scientists and engineers help teachers in elementary schools improve their skills. Mr. Weiss says he and the other volunteers help teachers by providing hands-on expertise. He notes that science is an area in which many elementary school teachers have limited experience. In elementary school, for the most part, your regular classroom teacher is responsible for teaching science, along with reading and math, and if they don't have a strong science background, just by nature, they're going to tend to underrepresent science in the curriculum. Fred Tanique agrees. He just started teaching science classes a few months ago. He says, "A lot of times I'll spit out information I learned in the book, or things that are part of the curriculum. Dave helps me learn how to supplement that information so that it's more relevant to them, so that it will be more relevant to their work experience later on in life." 15-year-olds in the United States scored about average in science among countries that took part in testing by the OECD in 2009. The OECD is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. But Dave Weiss says he is hopeful for the future. He says he tries to give elementary school students a solid foundation. His hope is that they'll develop a curiosity about what's going on around them. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Pursuti. We have more programs at voaspecialenglish.com, where people can read, listen, and learn English with texts, MP3s, and activities. We also offer English lessons at the VOA Learning English page on Facebook.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Teachers and parents usually call attention to the pictures when they read storybooks to preschool children. But a study published in 2011 suggests that calling attention to the words and letters on the page may help a child's reading. The 2-year study compared children who were read to this way in class with children who were not. The children whose teachers most often discussed the print showed clearly higher skills in reading, spelling, and understanding. These results were found 1 year and even 2 years later. Shane Piasta at Ohio State University was an author of the study. She said most preschool teachers would find this method manageable and would need only a small change in the way they teach. They already read storybooks in class. The only difference would be increased attention to the printed text. If you get children to pay attention to letters and words, it makes sense they would do better at word recognition and spelling. But research suggests that very few parents and teachers do this in a systematic way. The report appeared in the journal Child Development. More than 300 children ages 4 and 5 were observed for the study. The children came from poor families and were below average in their language skills. There are different ways that adults can talk to children about print. They can point to a letter and discuss it, and even trace the shape with a finger. They can point out a word. They can discuss the meaning of the print or how the words tell the story. And they can talk about the organization of the print. For instance, showing how words are written left to right in English. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report in Special English. Speaking Kurdish was a crime in Turkey until about 20 years ago. More recently, the government has eased some of its restrictions on the use of the language. Now, the government is letting some schools offer Kurdish language classes. Halil Chechen teaches beginning Kurdish to medical students at Dicle University in southeastern Turkey. He says people are happy about the changes that are now being put into place. But he says people have been waiting a long time, 50 or 60 years. One student says he welcomes the classes. He speaks only a little Kurdish, he says, and he sees the classes as a big step, but they are only the beginning. He thinks learning Kurdish should be required, especially in health education. He says it would be even more successful if Kurdish were taught starting at a young age. The university is in the mostly Kurdish city of Diyarbakir. It is not far from the border with Syria. Syrian Kurds seized control of their region from Syrian government forces earlier this year. Now, children are learning Kurdish as a first language. Kurds in neighboring Iraq have had that right for years. But Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan recently rejected calls for Kurdish education in the mother tongue. He called it a terrorist demand of the Kurdish rebel group known as the PKK. The Prime Minister says there is no such thing as education in the mother tongue. He says the country's official language is Turkish. Kurdish politicians face increasing pressure if they violate language restrictions. But the Kurdish language and culture are increasingly making their presence felt. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. One World Education is a group with a program in which teachers develop teaching materials based on student writing. The students are in middle and high school and write essays about cultural and global issues. Students are invited to write about an issue they find important. Then, professionally developed learning materials based on chosen essays are used in schools to teach other students. Eric Goldstein is the executive director of One World Education, based in Washington. He says the nonprofit group has worked with over 1,500 student writers. He says 350 teachers use the One World curriculum. He says the essays can serve as a writing and learning guide for thousands of students. Mr. Goldstein is a former classroom teacher himself. He and another teacher began forming plans for One World education in 2006. The group publishes a study unit each month from August through May. Each unit of the curriculum starts with an essay called a One World Reflection. The subjects have ranged from single parenthood to protecting rainforests to exploring Arab cultures, says Mr. Goldstein. Layla Kunesh of Washington wrote about her feeling that media reports in the United States are often unfair to Muslims. A learning activity based on her reflection called for students to collect examples of media stories and discuss whether or not that was true. Layla was chosen as a One World Student Ambassador last year. 12 students are chosen yearly. Their reflections are published on the group's website with learning activities and reading and writing aids. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Some people think of politics as a game, but an online game lets people think of themselves doing one of the hardest jobs in American politics, cutting the federal budget. The game is called Budget Hero. Students in Los Angeles and other cities have been playing it. Budget Hero lets them decide how they want to spend federal tax dollars. The game uses information from the Congressional Budget Office. It shows what effects each cost-cutting proposal would have. High school student Dory Bennett says she thinks spending cuts are needed to keep the economy growing and keep the American dream alive. I want to grow up, go to college, get a good job, have kids maybe, a dog, and a house. The students consider the same issues facing lawmakers in Washington. The game was developed in 2008. In the newest version, students make decisions about what spending is important to them. Do they want to reduce taxes? Spend more on environmental protection? What about defense spending? Making these decisions helps clarify their goals. Jane Harmon is a former Democratic representative from California. She served in Congress for almost 20 years. She now heads the Woodrow Wilson Center for International Scholars, which helped create Budget Hero. Ms. Harmon says the students are having more success than Congress at cutting the budget. More than 1 million people have played it so far, she says, and she thinks they have learned at least 2 things. 1, how hard it is, but 2, that it can be done if there's a will to do it. Student Jeffrey Burke agrees. The hardest thing for us to figure out was the little cuts, like the gas money and stuff. increasing taxes on gas because we felt it would have effects everywhere, from the truck drivers shipping our stuff across the country, or when you order from Amazon or whatever, to your drive when you're going to work. I think we need to look at the little things and realize that just because they're small money doesn't mean they're small effects. Joaquin Alvarado is with American Public Media, an organization that also helped create the game. He says many of the players will literally, in the comments, ask that Congress play this game to just get a little rational around the questions that have to be answered. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. You can find a video of students playing Budget Hero at voaspecialenglish.com. This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Students at some high schools in Illinois recently had some famous visitors. Among them were Jimmy Carter, the former American president, and Mikhail Gorbachev, the last president of the Soviet Union. Other speakers included former South African President F.W. de Klerk and Shireen Ebadi, the Iranian human rights activist. They were all in Chicago for an event in late April, the 12th World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureates. The students prepared for the visits by working on a human rights curriculum called Speak Truth to Power. The materials come from the Robert F. Kennedy Center for Justice and Human Rights. Manal Sala got to introduce Mikhail Gorbachev at her school, the Frederick von Steuben Metropolitan Science Center in Chicago. Manal is one of the top students graduating this year. She will be attending Northwestern University in Illinois on a scholarship for low-income students. Manal had not yet been born when Mr. Gorbachev became a Nobel laureate. He won the Peace Prize in 1990 for helping to end the Cold War and working for nuclear disarmament. Manal also got to introduce Mr. Gorbachev at the World Summit, where he joined the other laureates. She says students often hear about the Peace Prize winners and see them in documentaries. But having them appear in person, she says, makes them and what they did seem so much more real. Mr. Gorbachev said at the summit that he hopes more young people will work against global problems like poverty and unemployment. He said young people have to be given a chance to take a stand, to take a position in this world. At von Steuben, the former Soviet leader talked about his nuclear arms negotiations with President Ronald Reagan in the late 1980s. He also talked about growing up in a small Russian village and studying law at Moscow University. And he talked about the need for international cooperation, a theme of the World Summit. Students at Lincoln Park High School in Chicago heard from Muhammad Yunus. He won the 2006 Peace Prize for his work with microcredit for social and economic development. Mr. Yunus said he used his own money to make the first loan, about $27, to women selling baskets in a market in Bangladesh. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. South Korea's education system is highly respected, but there are concerns that academic dishonesty could harm its image in the world. That dishonesty includes cases of falsified research. And in recent months, 2 South Korean lawmakers have faced accusations that they copied work for their doctoral dissertations. Of course, problems like these are not limited to South Korea. In April, Hungary's president resigned after a university withdrew his doctoral title. A committee found that most of the pages of his dissertation on the modern Olympics were either direct translations or showed partial similarity to other works. Mr. Kim is a graduate student at Korea University who asked to be identified only by his family name. He attended schools in the United States and says Americans seem to understand that claiming other people's work as their own is wrong. He says Koreans may not yet have a well-established understanding of plagiarism and whether plagiarism is acceptable or not. A VOA reporter asked South Korea's education minister, Lee Ju-ho, how seriously he takes the problem. Mr. Lee said the problem is not as bad as it used to be. Still, he says, he wants to put more effort into eliminating plagiarism. Mr. Kim, the graduate student, says current efforts to educate college students about plagiarism are not very effective. But he says British and American professors who teach at South Korean colleges are helping to fight the problem. For example, he says one professor at his graduate school found a student plagiarizing and automatically gave that student a 0. Ian Ja is a professor of ethics education at Seoul National University of Education. He says the training should start in elementary school. He says children should learn that copying their classmates' homework or not identifying their sources of information is wrong. If they understand that, he says, then they will be able to write honest papers later in life. Michael Neil Shapiro, a Canadian, taught at 7 different South Korean universities. In Korea, he says, there are both ancient and modern reasons for thinking that it's okay to use other people's ideas without giving specific credit. But East or West, he says, one reason for plagiarism is the same: intellectual laziness and the hope not to be discovered. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. You can learn more about plagiarism and learn English with our stories and activities at voaspecialenglish.com.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report in Special English. The shooting of a 14-year-old Pakistani schoolgirl made news around the world last month. The Taliban claimed responsibility for the attack on Malala Yousafzai. She was shot in the head and neck as she left school. The next day, doctors successfully removed a bullet from her neck. She received treatment at the country's top military hospital. Later, she was transported to Britain for more treatment. Malala Yousafzai became famous for speaking out against the Taliban. She is also known for her support of education for women. It is estimated that only about 40% of Pakistani women above 15 years of age can read. Witnesses to the incident say gunmen who came to her school asked for her by name. They opened fire as she was entering a school bus. 2 other students also were wounded. The Taliban says Malala Yousafzai was targeted for what it called her pro-West ideology. It says she denounced the Taliban and called President Obama her hero. After the incident, a spokesman for the group said Taliban leaders decided a few months ago to kill the schoolgirl. They told gunmen to carry out the attack. The girl's uncle, Ahmed Shah Yousafzai, is head of the Swat Valley Peace Council. He told VOA that no one expected that such a fierce attack would be carried out against a 9th grade schoolgirl. The Taliban led a violent campaign for control of the Swat area in 2008 and 2009. The campaign included attacks on schools. The Taliban had banned girls from attending school. But Malala Yousafzai and her friends had disobeyed the ban by attending school. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, welcome to Education News in Special English. At American colleges and universities, the number of positions that offer the job security of tenure has been shrinking for years. Tenure is meant to give professors greater freedom to teach, write, or study subjects that might not be popular or politically correct. But critics say tenure can keep schools from dismissing unproductive faculty members or problem employees. Another complaint is that it can restrict the ability to make changes in programs or make the best use of limited budgets. The number of tenured positions at U.S. colleges and universities has been decreasing since the 1970s. John Curtis is the Director of Research and Public Policy at the American Association of University Professors. He says that only about 25% of faculty members have tenure or are in a position that might lead to tenure. The association says that at least 85% of faculty members should have tenure or be able to seek it. He says this will protect independent thought and freedom of speech. But a recent survey found that many colleges and universities plan to employ fewer tenured professors. The study was done by the Gallup organization and the online publication Inside Higher Ed. The survey asked more than 1,000 college and university officials about their hiring plans. The results suggest that tenured positions might continue to decrease. More than 58% of chief academic officers at U.S. public universities agreed that future generations of faculty should not expect tenure. More than 53% of private school officials agreed. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. A group called Story Pirates goes into schools and performs shows for children. But these shows are based on stories written by the children themselves. The grown-ups are there to help them become better writers. The Story Pirates are active in more than 200 schools across the United States. Their method is designed to help children learn about the purpose and structure of writing. Actors and teachers, known as teacher artists, help students write stories. The children feel the pride of ownership in their work and may get to see their story performed. About 200 actors and teachers are members of the Story Pirates. It was founded in 2003. The group is based in Los Angeles and also has performers on the East Coast. The basic program is called the Idea Storm. It involves 2 visits to a school. On the first visit, the teachers and actors hold a writing workshop at a student assembly. They help students express their ideas. Benjamin Salka, the group's chief executive officer, says they work with children to open up their imaginations. But that is only part of the process. He says, we work with them on the actual craft and structure of writing. In other words, Story Pirates is not just a creativity and self-esteem building program. It is a writing program. He says they work with students to rewrite and shape their story to improve it. The goal is a final product that can express the ideas that were in the writer's head. All the children get comments and suggestions on their work. After about a month, the Story Pirates return to the school. This time, they perform the stories that they have chosen and prepared for the stage. They sing, dance, tell jokes, use puppets, whatever they can do to make the experience fun. A more extensive program can be found at the Bronx Charter School for the Arts in New York City. Ann Lido is arts director for the school, where most of the students are Black or Latino, and many come from poor families. Ms. Lido says the work of the actors is an important part of the children's education. She says, as a school that has a focus on the arts, we bring the Story Pirates in to further our students' experience and understanding of academic content. Some educators may wonder how they can measure the effects of a program like this given the current importance of testing in schools. But Ann Lido says, it really is a magical moment when the kids see their stories come to life. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report in Special English. In late December, funerals took place for the shooting victims in Newtown, Connecticut, where 20-year-old Adam Lanza killed 20 children, 6 educators, and himself. Officials say Adam Lanza used guns owned by his mother, who he also killed during the shooting. The incident was the second deadliest shooting at an American school. In 2007, a student at Virginia Tech University killed 32 people and then himself. What happened in Newtown has reopened debate about gun control and issues like mental health services. President Obama spoke at a memorial service in the town. He said he will use whatever power he has to prevent more tragedies like the one at Sandy Hook. He named Vice President Joe Biden to lead a team to develop proposals to reduce gun violence. But days earlier, another community not far away regained a school in a story of hope and renewal. Flooding from Hurricane Sandy nearly destroyed St. Camillus School in the Rockaway area of Queens in New York City. The Catholic school stands just a short distance from the Atlantic Ocean. For 6 weeks, more than 200 students and teachers went to another school while St. Camillus was being repaired. But the reopening of the school on December 10th was a victory for the community. School Secretary Carrie Montero says the message from Hurricane Sandy is clearest in many recent acts of kindness. She said people from Connecticut, California, and Brooklyn, New York all offered help. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. An unusual high school in Texas recently welcomed a special visitor. President Obama visited Manor New Technology High School near the city of Austin. The high school seeks to help prepare students to meet the increasing demand for technology workers. It has gained national recognition for focusing on student projects in so-called STEM subjects: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Manor New Technology has 332 students. 68% are from ethnic or racial minorities. 52% are from poor families. Across the country, students from poor families are more likely to have low educational levels and leave school. But the Texas school sent 97% of its graduates to college in 2011 and all of its graduates in 2012. Most schools, however, do not have the financial support that Manor New Technology receives. It gets help from private organizations as well as state and federal funding. Technology schools are sometimes criticized for not paying enough attention to the arts and social sciences. But supporters say more money should go into STEM programs that will provide people with jobs. University of Texas professor Jeremy Surrey says workplace success depends on good communication and an ability to work well with others as a team. He says an understanding of cultures is important. For instance, some students at Manor New Technology High School reconstructed early Egyptian tools used to build pyramids. They learned about the engineering involved. But they also studied the social and cultural atmosphere of that time. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.